raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross, O Lamb of God, bring its scenes before me. Help me walk from day to day with its shadow o'er me. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. He is risen. Oh, that was weird, because usually by now I would expect the response. He is risen indeed. And it just echoes in here. It feels like we're a little lost this Easter, not being with each other. But isn't it amazing that with technology, we can be with each other wherever? So let's try it again, and maybe you'll say it right there at home. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Now try that with your family members when you talk to them on the phone, because I know we're not supposed to be out and about. And I suppose if you are out and about, taking a walk or strolling from a safe distance, try it out. He is risen. Did you miss it? He is risen indeed. Let's make a noise in the land during this 40 days of Easter. So I do greet you and bring you a reminder this day that the very peace and grace of Jesus Christ are yours and forevermore. Now, the scripture reading I want to share with you today is, it is an Easter resurrection message, and yet at the same time, it's not the first appearance, because the first appearance, of course, of Jesus takes place in the garden. But later in that same day, that day he was rumored to have been, alive, because that's all it could be when you had women as witnesses in that day and time. But when he was rumored to have been alive, the disciples were still together later in the day, and they were behind closed doors, all shut together. And there, behind those closed doors, is when they experienced his resurrected presence. Now, they were talking about the rumors. While they were talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and terrified and thought that maybe they were seeing a ghost. And then he said to them, Why are you frightened? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. And when they had heard this, when he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while in their joy, they were still disbelieving and still wondering. And then he said to them, "Have you anything to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate in their presence. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I suspect in those first moments when Jesus appeared to the disciples, their reaction is no surprise. Or it shouldn't be a surprise to us, should it? A surprise of terror? A little bit like maybe having a bad dream. And at the same time, as he begins to talk with them, they hear maybe a voice that must be somehow familiar, a voice that greets them and offers them peace, offers them assurance, offers them confidence. We know that what they have just come through, this week of a fast-changing pace that went from a king riding into the city, people shouting Hosanna, to their Lord and Master dying on a cross and in stealth being carried away and laid in a tomb. It must have all been a bit like a bad dream. It must have all shaken their confidence. Maybe a little bit like we're experiencing in these days. not just this past week during Holy Week, but since the news first started breaking in January. Joanne and I, as some of you may remember, were with our oldest son and his wife and family in Belgium visiting at the end of February. By the time we returned on the 9th of March, it was pretty well known that something very serious was happening. The news was different that we were hearing in Belgium than what it was here. Somehow there was more concern. It took a week after we came back before people here began realizing, wait a minute, maybe there's something more to this. And that's when our world then began to come apart, didn't it? It's as if all of the suspicions that we've had about one another or about our institutions or about big business or about other countries or other people or other motivations of people's intentions around the world, it's like all of this hit the fan all at once. And over the course of a week, I'm hearing things that I never thought I would hear. People believing that somehow the Chinese plotted to create this virus, like a chemical warfare kind of thing, trying it out on their own people first and then turning it loose on the world. People not only being suspicious of other people far away, but then when things began to get really unraveled here by the 20th of March or so, how many people that I began to talk with, now more and more over the telephone and in other ways, it appeared to me that we as a public have begun to not only lose confidence, as maybe we barely had of other people in strange places, faraway places, but we began to lose confidence even over, if we hadn't already, over our politicians, over our scientists, over institutions, even more so. We'd begun to lose confidence in ways that had been developing now for maybe a generation or two, but we'd lost it now to a degree in which, especially in these past days, in this past week, I've heard people really despair about. A lack of confidence now begins to make them wonder about what the future will be. How long before such confidence is so lost that we do have people beginning to riot, people beginning to raid closed businesses or to begin to swamp banks and pull money out? How long before our loss of confidence really does lead into a pandemic panic? The disciples felt this. Their world had fallen apart with the death of someone they loved so much and had so much hope for in their futures. So today when we come together, I want to invite us yet to hear the reality of where we are. I mean, already, I checked the numbers. As of Greenwich Mean Time this morning, in 4 hours' time, the world had already lost a total of 100,000 people to death, and then some. The world had already lost, in those 4 hours, new deaths of a little over 1,000. So by the end of the day, with more countries waking up and reporting, again, it'll be a staggering number. But with the loss of confidence during this time, as we're faced with all of these stark realities, it's time to figure out how to have restored within our hearts, at least, some confidence, and maybe a foolish confidence. At least that's what the world's going to call it. Let me tell you what I mean. If this were a normal spring, whatever that is, I'd be watching probably the NBA playoffs. Now, I'm not a fan of any team. I don't have any one particular team or player that I follow. I just kind of get in on, the games, and Joanne and I sometimes, she less for basketball than football, but oftentimes root for the underdog. It's just what we do. So we'd normally be following the game, but we're not. And instead, I was just kind of curious, looking things up and reading about different things of the season, and didn't realize that back, I believe it was maybe mid to late December, or must have been mid-December anyway, as the season was coming to a close, or rolling over, expecting to come to a close, already there was a record that was set by LeBron James, one of our Ohio NBA players. He had become then, as of that time, the very first player in history to have had what they call a triple-double against all 30 teams that he played. Let's see, what is a triple-double? I had to go look that one up. They keep statistics, during these games, and they keep track of points that a player makes, and rebounds, and assists, and steals. And they've been doing this for a while. I don't know, since the 40s, 50s, whenever the NBA got its start. And as they keep track of this, when any player reaches double digits in those categories, double-digit points, double-digit assists in any game, or double-digit steals, or double-digit, what was the other one? Rebounds. When they reach in the double digits, it gets attention, because that's a rarity that a player is so well-rounded, on both ends of the court, with offensive and defensive maneuvering. They're so well-rounded that they're only the ones that can add this up. People like Michael Jordan were great on the offensive end, but on the defensive end didn't quite have the same skill set, so never really made it into that category. But LeBron James is a different kind of player. And as he has developed over the course of time, he's done some outstanding things. Now, when he finished that game, that set that record, he had scored 25 points, had come down with 11 rebounds, had provided 10 assists, which means he got the basketball into somebody else's hand who immediately scored. That led the Lakers then to that game win of 112-107 against the Thunder. Now, listen for a moment as you actually see this in action. It's rather incredible.
Gilgeous-Alexander with the steal. Cannot finish at the other end. So defense to offense. Now the Lakers back the other way. LeBron all the way! Throw it down and the foul!
Good hustle back by Anthony Davis.
LeBron into the lane all the way to the rim again! Strength of LeBron James.
This basketball LeBron as he attacks, goes to the rim. Steal by LeBron.
Here they go again. LeBron, AD all the way. Guards in for the layup. Live, and it's taken by OKC. AD 3 steals. LBJ has 3 steals. They combine again. And LeBron James finishes. Turnovers.
Yeah, just a careless cross-court pass, and LeBron just reads that one easily and gets the steal and the easy deuce.
2 for LeBron, 3
Get assists.
Rondo has half the Lakers, 12 assists. He's got half a dozen. Rajon again. Here he goes into the front court. Another bounce. This time it's LeBron with the finish. Offensive rebound. Doing work is Dwight. LeBron comes up with it. Another 3 for Davis.
He's 3 for 3 from behind the arc.
Shooting 47%.
Wow, shot that early.
Very quickly. And the Lakers have a 3-on-1, now a 2-on-1. Lob for LeBron! Showtime!
Victory by the opposition.
First possession of the second half. Lakers and the Thunder tonight, and LeBron hits it, falling away. Not first team, but the player of the year on the defensive end. Lakers steal it away again, turnover number 12. LeBron, perfect bounce. Davis lay it in, count it! And 1 assist to LeBron.
Wait, what a play, and Anthony Davis just scoops it up, lays it up, gets a three-point opportunity. That's just good, fast-breaking basketball.
LeBron, number 1 in assists, alone on the right wing. Now they're cheating over, of course. It is Schroeder. LeBron James cutting his KCP. The dive, the pass, the score. LBJ with 8 on the clock as he glances at it. Little one-on-one, quick step back on its way. LBJ's got another deuce.
I don't know, with LeBron with the receiving end of it now.
And he's just going to pull up and launch.
Like I said, not with LeBron on the receiving end.
Since starting in double figures for Caldwell Pope with 10 this evening. LeBron gets into the lane, hangs over Noel and scores. Little running jumper. Your own popcorn.
So they don't put
gobs
butter?
of it on.
You don't get-
I don't think they have that
Oh.
availability. AD to the rack.
If we get another look at that one, watch what Gallinari does as the last line of defense. Ari is. Here comes, he goes there and he says, oh, no, I'm not even standing in. Not even going to try to take a charge or anything. I'm just getting out of your way. You can just show off if you want.
Gallinari with 21. LeBron bounce. AD 17 feet. Just outside the free throw line.
That's a pretty good answer.
2 points, 10 assists, 11 rebounds for James.
There's the 10th assist right there on the little bounce pass to AD at the free throw line for the smooth jumper.
And that's his 5th triple-double, of the year. Noel in front of LeBron. There's that three! Splashes it through. LeBron James.
So LeBron checks in with his 25th point.
As you see that clip, I hope what you experience is the awe that I have when I'm watching such a player as this, so well-rounded, so able to maneuver and make things happen on both ends of the court, that we begin to then ask the question, how? How does he do it? Well, the answer is not too difficult, I suppose. First of all, he's a rather athletic person, has been from the time he was quite young. Some even said, after having watched him in high school football, said that he could have well played for the NFL just as easily as maybe he could have for the NBA. But at the same time, being just a well-rounded athlete, it's the amount of work that goes into it. Now, LeBron James, like a lot of players over the course of time, have their ups and downs. And it's known by now, he's played long enough where he would even admit to the time periods of his life in which he wasn't performing as well, were times in which, well, he might have done a little bit too much pot, or he was distracted or just not focused. Part of having confidence in your ability is to be dedicated to the life that you live. We are people of rules. We like rules by and large. Now, as Americans, we don't like anybody to tell us what the rules ought to be, but we allow that to a degree because we know it's really good for us after all. It's good that we have meal times. It's good that there's certain etiquettes that we follow at work or in the home to make sure we're respecting one another and being respected. But to follow the rule of life is to practice what we do best and make it even better. And when it comes to developing confidence as a Christian, like a basketball player who will spend how many hours a day shooting in order to create that muscle memory that can do it, practically in your sleep on an off day even, we have our rules as well. The rule of prayer, the rule of worship, the rule of serving and watching for people who have need and then doing something about it. These rules help us to get better and better at living a particular way so that as we live, we have a confidence built up in us. No doubt, Jesus' disciples had that kind of experience while they were with Jesus for those 3 years of his earthly ministry. They were living as a ruled set of disciples, following the Master in his practices. And no doubt that gave him confidence in their living. And yet, when it came to this crisis, it just bowled them over. Not a one of the disciples participated in taking Jesus' body down from the cross. Not a one of the 12, shall we say. I mean, Judas had already hung himself. The 11 had scattered, and it was left to Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus to take the body down with a few of the women and put him in a tomb. They were so cut off at the knees. Their confidence was just wiped out. So that when Jesus appeared to them, he appeared to them with the first task of reigniting that confidence. Well, as we think about the people who have showed confidence in the course of, say, the NBA, we think of those who were greats, Many people will recognize the name Wilt Chamberlain. He played for the Philadelphia Warriors and was part of the NBA action from 1959 to 1973. He too was in this category of having set a record of triple doubles. He in his 14-year career, he set a record of having actually 83 occasions, 83 games in which he had triple doubles. Now that's to compare with LeBron's James's current record at having 94 triple doubles so far in his career. But it doesn't set the total record. The total record was actually held by a gentleman by the name of Oscar Robertson, who played for the Cincinnati Royals and the Milwaukee Bucks, a combination of those two teams from 1960 to 1974, also a 14-year career. But think about LeBron James, 94 so far, and he's well beyond now 14 years in his career. But Oscar Robertson, by the end of those 14 years, had 181 games in which he had triple doubles. The confidence that it comes with being that kind of a player enables these players to have an effect not just in the game for themselves, but a whole effect for the team. LeBron James's life is not a complete open book, but it's there. He's had a number of interviews and gone through a number of struggles in his career to become self-aware, if you will, aware of his own weaknesses and how he's worked at turning those weaknesses into strengths. And among the things is this struggle to find and retain some level of confidence, not just as a basketball player, but as a leader. So, for example, when he realized that while he was playing in Cleveland for the Cavaliers, he realized that the game and the coaching had all really focused on him carrying the weight. And when that got to be too burdensome after a few years playing for the Cavaliers, that's when he made a decision, and overnight, unbeknownst even to the Cavaliers, broke the contract and moved south to play for the Heat. And as he played for them, he agreed to play for them based upon the promise that the coaching would be different, that he would not be expected to carry the game pretty much on his own with some other good players, but to have the opportunity to at least have two really good players to team with, so that instead of him carrying the game and the game being focused around him, that what they would have the opportunity to do is to really build a team. Well, the first season with the Heat didn't go that well, but was certainly a big response, a big change from the previous season of the Heat before LeBron James joined them. But the next couple of seasons saw him go to national championships. That was his goal. That was his decision, to go from the Cavaliers to the Heat. He wasn't confident that he could lead a team on his own, to do it on his own. To carry that kind of weight and get to the championships. And that was a goal of his, to get to the championships. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. So by going to the Heat and now sharing in that load with others, and still yet providing leadership in the areas of the game that he was good at, they could do it together. And yet, even after playing with the Heat for a few years, and with some unexpected injuries and trade-offs of players, he realized that even going for the national championships didn't seem really to be the goal after all. That maybe the goal of playing the game was just that, playing for the joy of the game, which he hadn't really done, especially during that first season he played for the Heat. He played out of anger, he describes it. He played out of a motivation that was really life-draining instead of life-giving. And so that's when he realized that he couldn't keep playing even there. He found himself pretty much back into a coaching situation like he had in the Cavaliers, where he was now once again expected to pretty much carry the weight almost as a single player. That's then when he moved to play for the Lakers. And once again, the promise was to establish enough players with skills that would complement one another so that he wouldn't expect to be able to have to carry the weight, but they could share it together. The one statistic that shows this kind of dynamic the most, I think, are the assists. When a player grows enough confidence that it doesn't have to be him that shoots the ball, but he can be talented enough to see the other gifts on the court. He can begin then, as he goes down court, to not, well, we used to in high school call it hog the ball, but to get it at the right time to the other player who then scores. That's what the assists are. So he's making those triple doubles because now he's able to use his athleticism in all kinds of ways that keeps the other teams off their center. But it also spreads out the leadership to the rest of his team. And now the real confidence that he has is not just in himself, but being a leader who now develops confidence to this team. Well, all right, now that I've gotten there and just bored all of you who hate basketball, listen to the scripture again. Listen to what's going on. Jesus comes to the disciples, to his team, the ones he's been training for 3 years, the ones who just went through a crisis and had their confidence ripped out of their hearts. He comes to them, and as he does, he greets them. Take away the terror, that shock. And then as they begin to wonder and doubt, is this real? What is this? He shows them his hands, his side where he was pierced, as if to say, have confidence again. This is God's promise. I told you about this. But he didn't have to say it, did he? They began to wonder. They began to see it. They began to sense this is true too. The crisis was true, but the coming out of the crisis is a wondering truth. The coming out of the crisis is a life-giving truth. The coming out of the crisis is now restoring life, bringing back a confidence. And these 11, soon to be added with another 12th, these new confident leaders would go out and change the world until Christianity would so grow that it is nowhere in the world where there isn't a country that doesn't have Christianity somewhere present in it. And leaders who are not leaders just by themselves, but who are leaders of little bands of teams, confident that in the worst crises, God lives. God reigns. God's kingdom has come. This is the Easter message. And what do we do with it? Well, maybe we'll do like LeBron James. We'll create whatever we can do with what gifts we have. And it's not just on the basketball court for him. In the Akron area, he has developed the LeBron James Family Foundation, but it's charity which gives away scholarships, thousands of them, every year to Akron students who otherwise from poorer neighborhoods might not have an opportunity for our expensive education. Confidence in leadership in the community begins with all of us as individuals. It begins with listening to the promises of God, yet being confronted by the reality of the crisis at hand. It begins with giving our hearts in the rule of life to practicing, being Christian. Catching ourselves when we say negative things about other people, whether we know them or not. Catching ourselves when we judge one another or when we are trying to get ahead of one another instead of looking for ways to serve one another. These are the rules we live by so that in the midst of the crisis, we might still have confidence in the good news. He is risen. He is risen indeed. So let's sing about it in our hearts. Christ the Lord is risen today. Alleluia. Earth and heaven in chorus sing. Alleluia. Raise your joys and triumphs high. Alleluia. Sing ye Well, brothers and sisters, I can't wait until you're back. I can't wait until we're gathered together so that when I say, He is risen, I can hear your voices instead of the echo of my own voice in an empty building. But until then, keep the good news in your heart and hear the words offered by Jesus. Peace. Peace to you. Amen.